conservative beams get ran out by Catholics. White woman overreacting like when it's doing promise, now I'm out of control.
Gentlemen, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. My name is John Medler. I'm your friendly neighborhood millennial meme lord and shit poster. Brief background before we get to our honored guest today. IRL, I've been an on-the-ground activist for various causes that I've been passionate about, starting with Ron Paul 2012 when I was a right-leaning libertarian. I've worked with numerous different campaigns and organizations organizing and attending events, primarily in the greater Boston area. But generally speaking, I'm more than happy to just do my part coordinating people on the ground and letting others take all the glory. I've seen what happens to people when they become clout chasers, and it's that good. Everyone wants to be like Mel Gibson in The Patriot, like charging forward with the flag, being the guy on the movie poster. And I'm here just like, I'll be one of those average soldiers getting shot in the background. That's my lot in life. I'm just here to do my part fighting the good fight, which is why that's enough about me. Our guest of honor today is Pinesap. He runs a YouTube channel where he specializes in high IQ Catholic apologetics. He posts spicy memes on his Instagram where he has over 50,000 followers. And you can also find him on Twitter and Telegram where he is frequently juicing up the young Zoomer dominant America First movement, aka the Groypers. You can also find all of his social media links in the description of the stream. Pinesap recently made waves at the Fourth America Political Action Conference in Detroit. The main event ended up sadly being canceled by the venue, but the Groypers rallied in the streets. We're going to ask Pinesap about his experience there and his views on America First and where that goes from here. Welcome, Pinesap. How you doing, King?
I'm doing good, John. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing just fantastic. Literally just got out of work, drove home, and set up the stream. And yeah, basically, I heard you just got a new job recently.
Yeah, I did. I can't say too much about it, but it's a Catholic
I don't want to dox your workplace, but like that.
Yeah, no. It's a good job though. I really like it, and I love the people that I work with, and they're just awesome. I have nothing but like great things to say. I'm just really passionate about like what I'm doing, and that I get to do this show too. So life's looking up right now.
That's fantastic. So what is So for the normies out there, because obviously my channel has mostly just been like, yes, I have dabbed into politics before, but my channel has like mostly been memes and stuff like that. So for all of the normies out there, anybody who's unfamiliar, what is the America First movement? Where did it come from, and who are the Groypers?
So the America First movement is a political movement founded by Nicholas J. Fuentes. He's our leader, right? And Nick went to, Boston College. He was top of his class really for, debate. And people said that he was going to become the future president, right? And, he goes to Boston College and I believe
it was Boston University. Sorry.
Boston University. Instantly when you said that, I was like, no, wait, it's Boston University. My goodness. Boston University. And he kind of realizes that like there is not really a truly conservative movement in this country, right? I mean, we have Turning Point USA, we have all these kind of Young Americans for Freedom and all these organizations that kind of control conservative politics, but there isn't really a movement putting America first. And the reason why there's not a movement putting America first is because all those movements are bought out by Israel. They're bought out by AIPAC. They are completely beholden to foreign interests. And on top of that, they watered down conservative values. They're okay with gay marriage. They're okay with abortion up to a certain extent. They're okay with contraception. And so Nick wanted to cut out, I would argue, a very Catholic place in politics and create this movement that could give us the truly conservative movement that so many were hungering for. Really building off the work done by not the neocons, but the paleocons, who had struggled and had fought to establish a truly conservative like ethos within the political arena. And unfortunately, when they were around in the 90s and the 80s, they were kicked to the curb. They were kicked to the side. They had to give these small conferences where only the ones who were in the know to know would show up. And we are running because they walked, right? They walked so that we could run. And Nick has built off that beautiful legacy that they have established and just gone wild with it and been more successful with it than anyone could have ever imagined, right? And so because of that, he's founded this movement that wants to put America first in all its foreign policy and all its domestic policy, wants a truly socially conservative America, no compromise on any moral issues, and, wants to put the American people first in terms of shutting down immigration, shutting down migration, and keeping our demographics the same. And
That
that is the movement that kind of all the Groypers are behind. And a Groyper is just a person who is a Nicholas J. Fuentes supporter, right? A Nick Fuentes supporter. And so if you're called a Groyper, it means you support Nick, you're with Nick. There's no such thing as being a Groyper outside of supporting Nick.
Mhm. So the Groypers, I just want to I'm pulling up the infamous frog here. So the Groypers basically you take the name Groyper from one of the iconic Pepe variations. I'll pull it
Yes.
up here. And the frog's name was Groyper, and you guys sort of adopted it as your mascot.
Yeah, because I mean, there were some early Groypers early on who just used the profile picture as their avatar, and they would be like kind of some variant of far right. But we were unique in the way that we coalesced in this one movement. Excuse me, sorry, and kind of created a unique identity that was solely our own, right? It wasn't anybody else's. And so at that point, being a Groyper became synonymous with being a supporter of Nick, right? You couldn't really conceive of being a Groyper outside of that. It just didn't mean anything anymore if it was not tied to America First.
Yeah, you guys really just sort of like seized that and owned it for like
We
quite,
did.
yeah, like in many ways, kind of like you like seized the moment in the Groyper Wars at Turning Point USA. That TikTok that I sort of opened up the show with, that was my own little contribution from that time. As I was
Let's
also
go.
posting Groyper War stuff at the time because I just saw all these young kids showing up at Turning Point USA events and asking very inconvenient questions that they were just that the hosts were just embarrassing themselves over. I was just like, yo, let's go. It was
Like, we're
fantastic.
so back at that point. Because, I mean, the basic thing is nobody challenged Charlie from a right wing perspective, right? It was just kind of this generic socialism is bad, but we're still feminist and we're still pro gay. And we're actually for Israel because they throw gays off gays off roofs in Palestine or whatever. And I'm like, dude, this is just pathetic, right? I mean, even at the time when I wasn't a Groyper yet, my heart was already not in the Turning Point USA movement and stuff like that. It just seemed like it was full of a bunch of sort of grifters, men who just really, really, really wanted to impress women, and people who were ultimately very politically unmotivated. As a young man, men love fanaticism. Men love, in a certain way, extremism, but not in a manner of hurting anybody, but in a manner of supporting an ideal or an idea to the nth degree. And it always felt like Turning Point USA wanted to kind of butt up to the line, but not go any further beyond that.
Yeah, and you guys basically forced them to push the line to the point where they're now actually Charlie Clark is mirroring your talking points from what the Groypers were saying a few years ago.
He is. I mean, he's trying to play cleanup crew and he's like, oh, I was for immigration restriction. It's like, dude, you said you wanted to staple green cards to diplomas, my guy. You were not for immigration restriction. You were not for putting white people first. I mean, I remember, maybe it was a year ago when Matt Walsh finally started to actually talk about like white people as a group, right? White people as an identity. And before that, they're like, oh, we're not the left. We're not into identity politics. That's unimaginable. That's crazy. And it's like, dude, this is the paradigm through which all of human history operates. People associate with their tribe or their group, and your inability to identify with that, and especially identify with the legacy that white people have created in this country and in the West. I mean, I'll be blunt. White people built the Western world, right? White people built the Western world. And so if you're unwilling to identify the people who built the West, how can you save the West? It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it goes back to the Tower of Babel. You have all of these nations and groups, all of which created in the image and likeness of God, but all unique in their own separate ways with their own characteristics. And we're called to convert all of them, but they nevertheless have their own uniquenesses.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's one of those things where the human family is made up of all these different beautiful races. When we say we're white identitarians, we don't look at other races of people and say, oh, no, that person's evil or less than or what have you. No, we're all equally made in the dignity and image of God and capable of completely beautiful things. Africans have had some very beautiful Christian cultures prior to even the modern era. I think of Ethiopia and like St. Caleb of Axum or what have you. But this idea that we have to like blend all people together in a forced sort of integration is not a Christian ideal. And it's sad because unfortunately, some Catholics especially get very guilted into thinking that we just need mass migration or we need to sort of enable forced diversity as some sort of like messed up altruism. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, any nation state has a set of obligations to its like other allies. You can have charitable initiatives. Ideally, charity should be done through the church, I think, but whatever else you do, you can't neglect your base responsibilities to your own people.
No, you can't. And the moment you start doing that, you're not really being altruistic, you're being self-righteous. You're just pumping up your chest and saying, "Oh, look at what I did. Look at what I created." And it's like, "Okay, great. Well, now you have a race war going on within your nation and your nation's completely balkanized and people actually now hate each other, unlike if you had just allowed people to be with their own. They would have loved each other and honored each other and honored each other's separate customs. Now you create these cities that are completely divided along racial lines and no one has any respect for each other."
Yeah, so when we say make disciples of all nations, we really mean like all nations, as in let them be distinct, but then make them all Catholic.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying completely. And it's not like when we say make distinct or people should have their own nations, it's not like I'm saying if a African person flew in the US would be like, "What are you doing here, buddy?" or anything like that. But it's like, when they're coming off the boat in just droves and they are completely creating these ethnic pockets that are an entirely different culture, an entirely different nation. There's no integration, and that only creates hostility, and that only creates sort of an animosity between groups of people rather than a real social cohesion that we're looking for. Likewise, I will also just say this. I want my nation to be white because I want it to be white. I don't think I have to justify, or rather, I should say, I want my nation to keep the demographics it has because I understand that there's American Hispanics and Black people who've been here for generations and generations. But it just named two groups, but there's others, of course. But I want my nation to be majority white because it's my nation and it's my people. And I don't think I have to justify that by using sociological statistics or what have you. I don't even care if immigration did make the GDP better or it did make my taxes lower. I want my nation to stay the way that my grandparents had it be when they fought for it, when they shed blood and they had died for it. And anyone who wants to come along and change that, I think, is a malicious person. And I think they truly hate white people and they have nothing but hatred in their heart.
At this day and age, we basically have, I mean, even in the beginning, you had two main ethnic groups. You had a European diaspora majority, which we call white, and then you had an underclass, a servitude underclass of slaves that were brought over in from Africa, and then they were freed. And then we never really solved the issue between the issues between those two groups. Instead, we just kept bringing more and more groups in. And so I'm of the opinion, basically, like, let's focus on right now. We basically have like an Austria-Hungary situation where you have a multi-ethnic empire in the continental United States for all intents and purposes. And it makes more sense to me to focus on domestically settling the domestic issues that we have locally between all of these different groups that we have here versus continuing with all of these forever wars and then just bringing in more people in without figuring out, like, I don't understand how people think that you're just going to, again, it's like the magic soil fallacy. You people step on the land and you imagine that they're just immediately gonna assimilate or become like you. It doesn't work like that at all.
No, it doesn't. I mean, they think that we're going to hand these people from Sierra Leone a constitution and, well, yippity day, they're going to be as American as apple pie, right? And at that point, what actually winds up happening is they form their ethnic enclave and they start creating no-go zones, right? I mean, that's what you see in the UK, that's what you see in France, where Muslims will literally create these neighborhoods that you can't go to. If you go to it as a white person, you're almost guaranteed to be killed. And it creates such a hostility within those countries that no one can really work or thrive or live without feeling the constant pressure of this isn't the same culture I grew up in. I mean, it was very disheartening to read the testimony of all these British war vets talking about how the country they were currently living in was not the country they had fought for and they had even been willing to die for. It was a completely transformed country. Britain was not the same nation that they had, been willing to shed their blood for. And instead, it had turned into just this demagogic, evil empire of just multiple peoples just funneled together in one place who then wind up hating each other, loathing each other, and creating such a level of tension that you can cut it with a knife.
It seems like almost assimilation seems to work almost like a numbers game. Like if you have, I'm going to even take say that you have like purple people and I don't know, pink people or something like that. I don't know. Is pink too close to white? I don't know. I'll just stick with that for the analogy. But if you have like one pink person in the middle of 1,000 purple people and they're living amongst them, that person's going to eventually go native and assimilate with the purple people or assimilate with the majority group. But if you have like, say 500 of the pink people and 500 of the purple people living right next to each other, there's going to be no assimilation. It's the osmosis isn't going to happen among those numbers. So you need a balance with your immigration policy that facilitates assimilation by deliberately restricting the numbers that are coming in. At the very least, even if you have even a generous immigration policy at all, you have to make sure that those numbers are working out just for the sake of the social cohesion, if anything else. But what we have right now is you have a situation where we've screwed things up so long based on a false altruism that I don't think that people are unreasonable at all for saying, hey, we should just pump the brakes on this a while, stop it all entirely, and settle our domestic issues.
That's what I'm saying. And I mean, there are people who need to be deported. There's people who should not be in this country at all. And the longer that they are in this country, the more problems they create. I mean, why is it that like MS-13 is now a problem in America, right? And this horrific gang that has zero morals, will kill pregnant women and stuff like that. And now they're at our southern border. Now they're in California, and they're taking up ranks and taking up stock. I mean, there's parts of even my own city, like Denver, right, where you'll drive around and there's entire neighborhoods you can't really go to, right? I mean, it's just completely like uninhabitable as a white person, and you're wearing your skin color like it's a uniform. And they look at you and they're like, "Hey, there's Whitey, let's go get him," right? So oftentimes people find with immigration proponents that they're either sort of honest about what they want to do, which is genocide white people, or they're dishonest and they use just sort of this these incessant platitudes about like, oh well, it's just mean that you're anti-immigration. Well, I'd rather be mean and right than wrong and completely submissive to people who aren't my people, right? And I think really this tool that is used in our culture to make us sort of okay with what's going on is a level of shame, right? I mean, it even goes on in Catholic circles where you'll bring something up that's just a true point, and people are like, but did you really need to say that? Did you really need to mention that? And I'm like, yes, I did need to actually mention that because no one else is, right? No one else is bringing this up. We have to bring up these difficult issues even when people don't want to hear them, and they would rather, you know, fling their hand back and be like, "Oh, you're being ridiculous. This is just rage baiting. This is, not taking into account all the nuances of the situation." And we cut through that and we're like, dude, let's cut the crap, okay? Like we have a country that's falling apart. More immigration's not going to make it better. We have probably the worst generation of women known to man. I mean, I'll just be blunt, right? We, have complete problems with like promiscuity and stuff like that. Like, let's start being real and let's stop like the cap and playing pretend like we're somehow living in this paradise that we're not actually living in.
It's like, God forbid that you have the ability to make a distinction between people who are actually following your laws and respecting your culture and people who don't. Just like, nope, just throw open the doors, let everyone in without distinction. It's like, no, I mean, even Pope Francis recently said on 60 Minutes, yeah, you might have to send some of them back. Like,
yeah. I mean, legitimately, right? But you're never going to hear that from, you're never going to hear that from the r/Catholicism types.
yeah, you were just getting it. They were recently just posting about you on there. I saw on your Twitter.
Oh, yeah, me and them. Now, okay, I will say this is not dissing anyone who is who is my buddy on that app. Like, if you're a Redditor and you're like totally like we're mano y mano, like we're buddies, this doesn't apply to you. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. But for the people who are like, Pine Soup is an anti-Semite, racist, fascist. I mean, listen, I am all those things, but you don't need to say but I mean, number one, I don't hate people. I legitimately don't hate people based on the color of their skin or whatever. If you're gonna call me an anti-Semite because I'm honest about what Jews do and what they're involved in, so be it. Then I'm an anti-Semite. I know my heart. I know that I don't hate Jewish people. I don't wish Jewish people any harm. I've even stood against people who, do actually worship Hitler and think that like it's okay to hurt other people because they're Jewish or what have you, or do something unethical. But I'm also not going to kowtow to a religion that hates my Lord. And if you're expecting me to do that, you're going to be sorely mistaken, right? And on top of that, the whole fascist thing is, look, I'm sick and tired of democracy. Democracy is gay. It doesn't work. It's not conducive to any sort of virtue. It fails every single time. And everyone wants to play pretend that it's going to be reworked or retooled for the millionth time and finally work, finally give us the Catholic society that we want. Bullshit. Excuse my language, but it's never going to work. Even the most Catholic countries in the world that have implemented democracy, it's always devolved. Just look at Ireland as an example. You had someone like Eamon de Valera, who is probably one of the best Catholic patriots to ever walk the earth. And now recently, right, they're completely okay with same-sex unions and they're completely okay with abortion. It does not work at all. And we need to start being real about that.
Yeah, Ireland fell so quickly. It was like within a generation.
It did. Yeah, I mean, quite literally within a generation. And it was one of those things where I think the hierarchs in Ireland did not do a good job advocating for the church and defending the church. And it almost
Yeah,
became this sort of like defeatist attitude of just like, oh, well, I guess the secular culture is right. There were still faithful Irish Catholics within that, but you just had a lot of Irish Catholics sort of acquiescing to the culture and just being like, oh, I guess you're right about your criticisms of the church. And then on top of that, you had an extremely just aggressive anti-Catholic element that the Catholics did not have an equally aggressive response to. They just sort of like bent over, wanted to meet in the middle and stuff like that, similar to our own country, right? Where it's like constantly about this bipartisanship. I mean, you see that even with Trump, where, he's like mentioning like, oh, even some liberals, voted this way on abortion or what have you. I don't give a crap. Abortion's evil, right? Why are we trying to kowtow to liberals? Liberals are our enemies, right? We need to just say it like it is and not try to make amends with people who hate us and want to stab us in the back.
Man, an interesting point there where it's like the Catholic cultures fell basically because Catholics themselves stopped defending them. It seems like the Groypers in many cases are a response to that, picking that up and be like, okay, let's put some aggression back into this and just completely ratio people on Twitter.
That's what I'm saying, man. Because I mean, unfortunately, there is a lot of estrogen in sort of the Catholic online sphere, and that's not being disrespectful to our sisters when I say that, but men don't act like men. Men want to like play pretend, and they want to pretend that the trad Cath monarchy is going to come tomorrow. And it's like, dude, you've got 500 hours in Hearts of Iron 4. Like, let's be real. Let's be a little honest. Not dissing anyone who plays Hearts of Iron 4.
I've
but
got
it's
a
like,
lot more hours than that in that
yeah,
game.
but it's like one of those things. Like I'm totally, I'm cool if someone plays that a ton, but it's like you can't be this LARPer anymore. You can't be this guy who's just going to sit on his butt and wait for the trad Cath monarchy to just spring up out of nowhere. Especially when you're counter signaling people like us who are out in the streets. Oh, Pinesap, you don't do anything. Listen, dude, we have the footage. I was up there. I was out there and I was doing stuff. I flew my butt out to Detroit to actually do stuff. Where are you? You're hanging out on Discord, you're hanging out on Reddit, and it's not about me, it's about all of us. It's like we are in this. We have actually John, you've participated, you've done stuff.
A
Where are
lot,
these
yeah.
effeminate like side, peanut gallery critics when everything is down and out, right? Where are they? They're nowhere to be found because all a critic does is sit on the sidelines and say, "Oh, well, I don't think it should be this way, or I don't think it should be that way." That's great. Put your opinion in the suggestion box, garbage, right? You're not doing anything. So if you're not doing anything, I think your opinion means less than dog crap to me.
Yeah, one thing that I keep noticing about these people is you'll have something like, it was a really bad thing that we let the patriarchy fall. How do we fix this? How about we put more women in politics? That'll fix the patriarchy. What?
Yeah,
No,
I love these people who are like, "Oh, based Georgia Maloney," and it's like, "Oh, Georgia Maloney that basically has not gone through any of her promises on immigration and is completely like kowtowed on that issue." Or let's see, Marine Le Pen, who called Catholics Nazis and stuff like that and completely slandered and criticized us. Like, I'm like the server, right, in the full waiter outfit, and I'm like, "You're based women, sir. You're based political women, sir." It's like they always find a way to compromise our values and water them down. And anyone who thinks that there's based women in politics, it's like, dude, she's never going to sleep with you. Okay. I hate to break it to you, but you can say that all you want, but she's never going to go out on a date with you.
all the most based women I know are not political at all.
That's what I'm saying. Like they make bread and they like hang out with their gal pals and stuff like that and like take care of the kids. They're not, out there being like, I actually read all whatever chapters it is of James Mason's Siege and I'm ready for the revolution or whatever. Those women you need to stay away from. They're mentally ill,
Can confirm. The movement hoes are not good. They cause a lot of drama.
Many a man has fallen to the movement hose.
It's not. That's thankfully I've managed to stay clear of it myself, but I've seen it, man. I've seen it.
Yeah, dude. Well, the thing is, as a brother, like, look, I get in our side of things. A brother gets down sometimes, and he's like looking for a wife or whatever. And it sometimes does lead men to thinking like, oh, maybe this girl who, has the skull mask profile picture and, is in all my discords is actually the one. But what it winds up leading to is you're kind of looking for women in all the wrong places, right? Because, I mean, number one, those women are predatory. They know that they're going to find unmitigated, unfiltered levels of free male attention if they just know all the right buzzwords, right? And I showed this on stream the other day, but like Identity Europa, which I'm not necessarily, I wasn't an Identity Europa supporter, but I think they're a good example of this. They had some based, femoid, some based woman in their movement. And what does she do? Oh, she completely doxes all of them to Unicorn Riot and ruins all their lives and gets to go on like 60 minutes and cry about it and be like, "Oh, I was a victim and I didn't know and I just wanted to belong." It's like, I guarantee that girl is out there getting piped by some new guy, and whatever dude who was like absolutely in love with her and head over heels is rotting in a prison cell somewhere. So this is where these women lead to you. I know I'm very abrasive with what I'm saying, but it's like, it's just true. I've seen it happen 100 times, and every single time I see some guy come in and it's like, "Trust me, bro, she's one of the good ones." It's like, really? And am I gonna find you in a jail cell like, 5 years from now? I mean, what's going on, big guy?
Pretty sure I knew one guy that, well, he ended up in jail for that kind of thing. Another guy, different woman, but he ended up, I think, going to fight in Ukraine with like the Azov guys or something like that, and I've never heard from him since.
Oh my goodness, dude. And it's like, why are homies ruining their lives for these women? Like the things that men will do to impress women, like you will literally go fight in a meaningless war just to get some attention. It's like,
To be fair to that one example, I don't think it was just because of her that he went and did that. Like he went on a whole there was another guy that I'm pretty sure was a Fed that like groomed him into that. Like,
oh, gotcha. I totally get you then. Yeah, because I was gonna say, dude, like if you're gonna go be willing to fight and die in a war over some like eho, it's so over for you. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. That is just like some fatherless behavior right there.
There's a lot of well, this is another thing. Like there are so many. It started with a lot of the problems started with the millennials. The millennials were just blindsided by this whole modernity and social media stuff. And I think many of the Zoomers saw what happened to the millennials, and the smarter of the Zoomers sort of tried to prepare for that, but still a lot of them fell victim to the same thing. And even the ones that were smarter and saw it coming are still trying to like recreate what wasn't passed down to them. And
Oh,
there and
right. Yeah. Yeah, no, dude, John, you hit it on the head, man. Like, it's one of those things where we're dealing with a generation that was not raised by fathers. And so they're kind of trying to account for that lack of masculine mentorship through other ways. But it leads to some very weird results. I mean, like the whole red pill movement, right? Like,
Mhm.
Andrew Tate, whether we like to admit it or not, is sort of a transplant father for a lot of these men who otherwise don't have any male role model in their life, right? They look at him and they look how he pulls, women, or how he gets money, or how he's very, very successful. And they desire all those things, but not realizing that there are spiritual consequences that come with selling your soul to the devil to get those things, right? It's not just a simple I'm going to get all the things that Andrew Tate wants and be perfectly fine. It's a Faustian bargain, right? Meanwhile, you get all those things, you get to the very top and you realize like my life is completely empty. My life is completely devoid of God. I don't have God in my life, in my heart, uh, you know, sp- spurning me on towards him so that I can be with him in the kingdom of heaven forever. Instead, what I have is a lot of meaningless materialistic items or people in my life who don't care about me and only want me for my money. And now I just sort of have to cope with that, right? And what's unfortunate is if you live in a society where Andrew Tate is the most masculine role model around you, of course you're going to gravitate towards them. I mean, who else do you have to go to, right? People can sit there and be like, "Oh, I don't understand why guys would, look up to Tate or what have you." Well, if your dad, I mean, number one, if you don't have a father in the picture, you don't have any male role model. You do have a dad in the picture, but your dad's some pudgy, old guy who's like, "Oh, remember when I went to Woodstock in '69 and met your mom or whatever." I think most of us have Gen X parents, maybe not boomer parents, but
I have boomer parents. Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, if your parents are not, or rather your dad for a young man is not very impressive or doesn't spurn you on to be a better man or just isn't involved in your life, it's like you look for that involvement somewhere else. And Tate, whether we like to admit it or not, gives men that involvement. And that's what leads them down the perilous path that he cuts out for them.
Yeah. I think there's a pitfall in that a lot of young men find where they'll hear a lot of the red pill stuff, and they do glean some insights about women and female nature from that they were just never taught because they were raised to think that men and women are just blank slates, and then reality hit and they realize that is not the case at all. And then the red pillars are offering some useful information, but then some guys start to think, well, if I find a traditional woman, then she'll be totally different. When it's like, no, female nature is still female nature. It's just so that when it is oriented towards God, it becomes rightly ordered.
That's very, very true. And it's one of those things where a father figure in your life will tell you things like, well, it's good to have a wife, but you should be pursuing God. You should be pursuing the path that he has designed for your life. And if that allows for a wife to enter into your life, then blessed be God. But if it doesn't, that's something you have to accept. And a father also gives a man sort of the courage to be able to be decisive in decision making and be assertive, but not using that to the detriment of other people or to use or exploit other people. He instills a man with sort of the knowledge and the values of what that lineage has carried down, right? Stories of his ancestors, stories of the great men that came before him to inspire him to do good things in his own time and make a lineage for his children and his grandchildren. And because we don't have that now, men are just kind of forced to make these identities. I think that's why, unfortunately, even in our circle of things, you do get the LARPy sort of elements, because the LARPiness doesn't necessarily stem from men wanting to be lazy or wanting to not, pursue higher things, but rather it comes from a inability for them to see anything beyond what they've been given, right? And so they're trying to create this identity with nothing given to them from scratch, right? And I feel for those guys. I feel for those men. My dad was very, very good and instilled me with a good head on my shoulders and stuff like that. And the older I get, I realize how much I've undervalued that, because I see so many guys who are just completely lost and they look to anyone that can give them any sense of direction.
Yeah, especially the LARPiness really, I think it always feels like such a battle just to get people off of the social media and actually taking action in real life, even if it's not necessarily like going to rallies and stuff like that. Rallies are fun, but a lot of the real bread and butter of organizing and get is really just building those real life social networks, just getting people into a room and making those connections. That's like 90% of it, really.
Yeah, dude, honestly, like if you're leading a Bible study and you're maybe working out with people, or you got like a men's group, right? That
Hmm.
even if you go to a but not getting drunk, of course, but you go to a bar, you hang out, you talk about, sort of these deeper concepts and questions of life, and allow a man to ponder, like, what is my life worth? What is my life heading towards? Like, that's doing a lot. That's not LARPy. That's real life action at that point, right? And if you're in any way moving beyond that, you don't need to necessarily go to the rallies or go to any of these organizations. I would even say if you have a lot to lose, it probably would be best not to, so that you can sort of infiltrate maybe your workspace or company or any sort of position of power, that then you can level it for the guys who are out there doing these things, who are willing to take that risk and risk their necks in order to create the kind of society that you want to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, even as Catholics, there's just a tremendous amount of just social infrastructure that we have everywhere. Like we have parishes everywhere, and there are so many groups and organizations and activities that are connected to those parishes. Like you have the Knights of Columbus everywhere. Like you have the St. Vincent de Paul Society. You have I mean I could just keep going on. You have your local Bible studies or men's groups or young adults groups and things like that. There's so many ways that especially that faithful Catholics can really, especially young people at this point in time, can really start to like sort of get their foot in the door right now. So as particularly with an organization like say the Knights of Columbus, very venerable men's group, Catholic men's group that I at least in I don't know whether this is the case in all other councils, but in my local council, definitely very. I'm by far the youngest guy there by decades, but I'm also spearheading a recruitment drive there within the next few months, and so the goal is to get enough people of my generation and younger there who can then start establishing ourselves and be ready to receive the torch as it is passed.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think the real way that, men want to be recruited into, say, the Knights of Columbus or even the St. Vincent de Paul Society is you have to show them the fullness of Catholicism, not just sort of this beige, banal, I almost call it fluffy Catholicism, right?
Hmm.
Where,
Hmm.
I mean, I hate to say it, but like in modern biographies of the saints, right? They'll leave out all this sort of politically incorrect cool stuff that like a dude would read and be like, "Wow, I actually like really connect with that saint now."
They
And they
water
instead are
down
just
how base these guys are by so
legit.
much.
I mean, if I look it up, I'm pretty sure Saint Vincent de Paul on his Wikipedia talked about wanting to like launch a crusade against Protestants in continental Europe. And it's like how do you not hear that as a young man and say, now that's not awesome. I mean, it's like that is so cool. That is so fantastic. Like guys hear that and they're like, okay, dang, like maybe I will go, volunteer at the, St. Vincent de Paul Society. This is kind of, baller, quite frankly, right? But instead, when you're like, well, this saint just did very nice things and treated everyone nicely, and that's why they're canonized. And it's like, and not that, being compassionate isn't a part of our faith. Oh my goodness, it is. You won't go to heaven if you're not compassionate to people. Not that, giving to the poor isn't a part of our faith. Archbishop Chaput famously and rightly said, if you hate the poor, you will not go to heaven, right? But integrate those elements which are a part of our faith and we should remember and never forget, with also the stuff of like, hey, fighting error in the world is cool, right? Like stepping on the head of Satan, right, when praying the rosary is cool. And if you sort of bring that edge to it, if you sort of bring that heat to it, I think a lot more men would want to then join the Knights or sign up, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like I have a clip from Archbishop Fulton Sheen here about this. Like, 'cause I have this already because I was actually working on an edit with this, but this is just the raw clip. But this is very much what you're talking about here.
The teenagers have a potency for sacrifice which is far greater than adults realize. I think one of the reasons that Nazism, fascism, and communism has had such appeal in our generation to youth is simply because teenagers and youths are sick and tired of a milk and water liberalism. There's nothing evil that men can fight against. There's nothing good into which they can put their teeth. And the young are tired of them. And they want to make a surrender, a commitment, an engagement. They want something that's worth dying for.
Venerable Fulton Sheen put his finger on the pulse of what it is. You don't have anything to die for. Even the act of joining the military in our culture, it's like, okay, what are you going to die for? Well, I guess I'm going to die for Zog to continue to prop up one of their puppets every 4 years and for this country to genocide thousands of children every single year and for two dudes to get married. And yeah, that's what I'm going to go die in a nameless country that I can't even remember in the middle of the Middle East, when I sign up for the military. Like, how does that inspire someone? I hear that and I'm horrified by that. But literally, that's the reality we're living through, right? Like, anything less than just being honest about that reality is facetious.
Yeah, no, I'm a living example of that. I had planned to join the military when I went to Job Corps. My plan right after Job Corps was to join the army. But at a certain point I got to be like, do I really want to put my life on the line for the bankers, for Israel, for all of for the oil companies and all this? It's like, yeah, I went from service guarantees citizenship, Starship Troopers, to being like, nah, I'm gonna serve my country in other ways.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like, someone looks at Starship Troopers and they're like, this is awesome because this is like authoritarian and fascist. Like, I'm just gonna be blunt.
Coolest thing ever.
It's so cool, right? Why does everyone like Helldivers too? It's like because it's authoritarian, it's fascist, it's fanaticism. It's like you are going to vote with your bullets, right? In this video game. And people sell the army now. You'll always see these army recruiters, and these guys just look like they hate their life, man. Like, they'll come up to you and they're like, well, hey, listen, Army's got a lot of cool job opportunities, cool car. Hey, you want a car, right? Go get you some military. Girls really like it too. And it's like all these materialistic, like BS things that nobody wants. Like, I don't want girls or a car. Like, I want to, die in a holy war. Like, I want to die in like an eternal crusade, right? I don't want to die for, materialistic objects that are not worth, seeing my buddy blown apart for.
Oh yeah, when I was talking to recruiters, it was all about like, oh, look how much you could look how much easier you make your college. Like, it's like, no, like that's not enticing.
Look how much you could make your college easier. I'm just saying,
They literally had to bust out the military e-girls to try to get people involved in the military. All these e-girl psyops and stuff.
Dude, anyone pathetic enough to sign up for the military because he saw like an e-girl, I'm like, can we just send that guy to the front lines? Like, have him go sweep a minefield or something? Like, I'm sorry, but like, if you're that much of a simp that you're like, oh my goodness, like this hot e-girl, I gotta join the military now. That's just pathetic.
I've have plenty of friends that are veterans, and none of them will tell you that one of the reasons to join is for the barracks bunnies.
The fact that our military even has a term like that, barracks bunny, is shameful. It's shameful.
You know why? You know why they call them that, right? I mean, it's kind of evident in the name. But
yeah, I mean, they're getting passed around more than
they hop from bunk to bunk.
Yeah, they hop from bunk to bunk. They're getting passed around more than a cheese pizza at a Chuck E. Cheese birthday party, you know? Like, I mean, at that point, like, you have to really wonder, like, I mean, I don't understand how someone's not red-pilled about women working being a bad idea when they literally hear something like barracks bunny. They're like, wow, that's just awesome that she's getting just railed by every guy in the base. I'm so glad these people are defending my country. It's like, this is just disgusting, dude. Get this out of here. This is haram, you know?
I'll tell you what, if I ever have daughters, none of them are ever joining the military.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, if I have daughters legit, like I want to raise them to be first-rate women, not second-class men. You know, I want them to be the best, most virtuous and holy women that have ever lived. You know, following in the footsteps of Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Bridget of Sweden, Saint Therese of Lisieux. You know, I'm not looking for them to be some, you know, awesome girl boss who just totally owns the misogynist by showing how, you know, brave she is in entering the military. Meanwhile, she's getting, you know, piped more than the Nord Stream pipeline. You know what I mean? Like, that's disgusting.
Yeah, no. Easily the most based and faithful Catholic women in my life are all not political. My mom raised us as a homemaker. She's not political at all. She hates politics. My sister, wonderful woman, perfectly faithful Catholic. She's not political. She doesn't even talk about it with me. She doesn't even, frankly, she's often confused about what I believe because I keep posting spicy memes in the young adult group Discord, and she's like, "What the heck are you doing?" but also my girlfriend loves the fact that I'm political, is not political herself. She loves the fact that I'm a patriot, but that she's like, yeah, that's your thing. Go ahead, go fight the good fight.
That's real, dude. I mean, you want your woman to be supportive of your politics, but you don't want your woman to. I mean, it is quite literally like Sam Hyde said. Like, if you want a woman to perfectly like have all your politics, you're going to be dating like a man with Asperger's, dude. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, you know, women in general are not political. They just don't think in a political way. They think in a more sort of unitive, like homemaking, community keeping kind of way. That's why, like,
is that why
my mom
is that why when they do get political, they sort of seem to veer into collectivism?
Yeah, I would argue definitely that's why they go into collectivism, because it's like women like compromise, women like people getting along, they don't like fighting, they seek to end sort of chaos or what have you, and in certain situations that is a godsend and that's beautiful. But in politics is meant to be a war. It's meant to be fighting. We are fighting these issues out. And when you have women enter that space, it basically just always turns into like the men playing pretend with them. You know what I mean? Like, when you really think about it, like women in politics is basically like men being the babysitters. It's like, oh, good job, sweetie. You voted on that bill. You ran in that Senate race. You were so smart. You were so, you know, talented. And you're just, I mean, like all the glazing that has to happen for women like Margaret Thatcher. Iron Lady, right? Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. What was so iron about her? Fact that she led to a Catholic patriot like Bobby Sands dying from starvation. Oh yeah, Iron Lady, by the way, right? Iron Lady. I like it quite literally is just these men like glazing these women because they want them. I know I keep saying this, but like want them to sleep with them, right? Like want their approval, want these women to like them and stuff like that. And it's what our society has been subjected to for like really sort of the past like 40 to 50 years. It's just like these women entering politics, not knowing what they're doing, not knowing, you know, how to actually stand up for any values. And the guy, their army of just orbiters, their army of boomer Gen X orbiters behind them, just cheering them on, saying, "You go, girl, you show that patriarchy." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like we almost have to go harder after the simps and the orbiters who feed the e-girls, because I mean, if you think about it, if men create patriarchy, who's going to create the new patriarchy? Who's going to reestablish the patriarchy? It's going to have to be the guys. I'm sorry, it's not gonna. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to. Okay, ladies. Okay, we're going to convince you that you've been wrong this whole time, and then you're just going to step back. And
you go up to him. You go up to him, sweetie, can I have some political power? Can I reestablish the patriarchy? It's like, no, that's pathetic. You go in there, you're just a man, and you bust through and you're like, hey, woman, I'm going to take over and you're going to have to like it, right? And then she, being a woman, seeing your raw male strength, is just like, yes, sir. And that's how it goes, right? That's how it goes. And it's one of those things where, because women, here's the thing: women can form themselves to whatever society they're living in. So it's not that of course, women do have agency, and they do hold responsibility for their bad actions. Of course, I don't think that women don't have agency, but it is one of those things where it's like the guys are letting them act this way. The guys are letting them have their balls in a vice, and it's like if more guys were just like, nope, we're not playing pretend anymore. Sorry, sweetie. Like, playtime's over. It's time for the men to step in, right? You would see so many women just not be able to do anything because they can't do anything, right? Their whole power lies in how much power they allow men to give them, right? By using things like their sort of feminine mystique as this sort of bargaining chip, right? Like, well, I'm not going to sleep with you if you don't do this. Okay, great. More time to focus on projects and, channel my my virtue, right, into other projects. I'm glad you don't want to sleep with me, right?
Yeah, no. I find the whole incel thing, the fact that they will weaponize access to sex against you but from the Catholic perspective, that's almost like you're doing us a favor.
You're doing us. I mean, literally, dude, St. Paul, the Council of Trent literally say celibacy is superior to marriage. So when it's like, I'm not going to give you the thing that's going to lead you to sin, you're like, I didn't want you to. You know what I mean? It's like I see this as a complete win.
Yeah.
What's the L being taken here, right?
No, exactly. No, I was at one of the the picture of myself that I used on the thumbnail for this stream was from a men's pro-life march, and I remember the Antifa were there basically shouting incel at us when the whole march was just like guys in suits like holding crosses and stuff like that, and like most of those guys are married. So number one, your insults are, first of all, just false. Second of all, for the rest of the guys that are virgins, good. That's you like the left does not understand our value system.
That's what I'm saying, dude. And it's like one of those things where, there's some like bulimic dude, some bulimic, like tranny looking guy being like, I bet you don't get any pussy or whatever. And it's like, why? So I could be like you? Like, get the hell away from me. What are you? You're like an alien. You know what I mean? Like, it's like some freak who like goes up to you and, bleached hair, like just, baggy eyes, like either way too overweight or way too skinny. And he's just like, well, I bet you don't get any, incel. And it's like, if not getting any leads to me being anything not like you, I am glad. Thank you. Yeah, please, by all means, take all the women, man.
I say in the future, when we finally establish the Catholic theocracy and we ban fornication, then everyone will be incels. You will all be celibate, and it will be involuntary because you will go to jail.
We're gonna have like fines for having premarital sex, like Franco's Spain. Like if you have premarital sex, you have to pay like a $3,000 fine. That's gonna curb that real quick, man.
We'll have our own like C18 forms from Hell Divers too that you had to fill out, except it's called the Sacrament of Marriage.
That's what I'm talking about. I love it, dude. I love that plan. We're gonna implement it.
Yeah, but speaking of which, to the way to actually get there, because one of the things I do like about the Groypers is that one of the criticisms I feel like that I hear from a lot of the right is that, the self-criticism of the right to itself is like, well, we spend a lot of time criticizing the left, but we don't really put together like a positive vision for the future. The Groypers definitely do that. They definitely put forward like the political manifesto is right here. This is the political manifesto, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. There's all our policies. There's the positive future that we are proposing. Now, but then to get there, there is a lot of real politic involved. If we have to resort to, incrementalism, we will resort to incrementalism. But if we have to, make strategic alliances here to push our agenda forward a little bit, like basically, like it's not like a all or nothing. We will push those ideas as far as we can push them, and then reorganize so that we can push them a little bit more. Like what so I feel like the Groypers have, they've done a good job of articulating that. Nick's basically just been acting like as the weather vane for the whole rest of the group. But then it's decentralized in a way where, okay, it's centralized around he's being the weather vane, but he's not like, micromanaging people, directing people. He's giving people the vision, and then they have to go out in there and build these social networks and build their own lives back up, basically.
Right. Well, and the decentralization aspect, people have sometimes criticized that before, and they really don't get it. They're always like, oh, well, why doesn't Nick have an official org in this way? And why doesn't he have an official membership roster and stuff like that? I'm like, why? So we can be like Patriot Front. So, someone can find a list of, oh, here's the list of all the official Groypers, right? Let's dox their name and address and get them fired from work or whatever. Like, people don't seem to work out the risk that you take with like a membership org, right? Membership orgs, while well-intentioned, oftentimes devolve into people getting doxxed, getting their lives ruined. It leads to a lot of infighting, financial mismanagement, or whatever. It's a lot easier to just say, like, look, Nick's the dictator. We have the vision. We're all going to go with his vision. And, whoever's not with it, we just kick him out by force. I've seen people get bullied out of AF before. Yeah, I remember there was some guy named like Jacob on Twitter or whatever, and he was like, it was the worst humble brag I'd ever seen. He was like, yeah, guys, last month, I did stuff with a 9 out of 10 hottie, but don't worry, I've repented. I'm different now. And literally I saw in the course of 24 hours, this homie just got bullied. He just got absolutely destroyed. People were ripping him apart. I was ripping him apart on the timeline, and we're like, dude, you are not repentant. And he's like, I'm not a Groyper anymore. And then literally just deleted his account and logged off Twitter forever.
Sounds like you guys know how to clean house.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Well, because the old heads especially have kind of become really good at sniffing out people who will be like caustic to the movement, right? Mm-hmm. And especially with the betrayals of like Patrick Casey, the betrayal of someone like Jaden McNeil, or even to a lesser extent Franson, to be honest, and stuff like that. Like, people can just get this sort of like, this person's a grifter, this person has their own interest, has their own designs on the movement that are not in alignment with ours. We're gonna kick them out. You know what I mean?
Dude, like so I've been following Nick since like the old RSBN days back in 20.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So watching like all like the old time quote unquote Groyper generals get like, they're like all gone, like basically, like it's
pretty much, dude. Well, and honestly, like all of them were dead weight. I mean, like, Beardson in some ways is a Groyper general, but like Beardson's always been just this great guy because he just loves Nick. He's friends with Nick. He's not a clout humble man, right? And that's why he's still around. Wurzelroot's the same way too. He's just a good man. And they like, we all, well, I'm not a general, I'm just a supporter, but like everyone, whether you're a supporter or general or what have you, who has been around for a long time, knows their place. I know I'm a supporter. I'm not a general. I don't represent AF. I'm not the face of AF. So if I make a mistake or whatever, that's completely reflective on old Pinesap. That's not reflective on AF or anything like that. And I know my place in that regards. And I even rebuke people who try to like do this whole like, oh, well, I would like AF if it was, more people like you or whatever. I mean, I had some guy on Twitter the other day who was like, you need to oust Nick and take over AF or whatever. And I'm like, number one, like, that's the LARPiest thing I've ever heard. I'm gonna oust Nick. Yeah, okay, homie. Second of all, what the hell are you talking about? Nick is my leader, right? So not only could I'd never in a million years could ever do that, but on top of that, it's like he's my leader. I'm completely beholden to him, and I know my place in the movement. I'm not trying to clout chase. I'm not trying to be above that which I know I am. And it's always people like that who you find will then align with your enemies and stuff like that. They'll always sell out. I mean, Patrick Casey, right, is completely sold out to the Jews now. You know, he was the other day saying, why are we siding with Muslims when we should be siding with Paul Gottfried, right? Who's a based Jew. And it's like, dude, that is so tone deaf. I don't know where to start with that, right? You know, you're based Jews, sir. And it's like, you know, Ben Shapiro again, or Dennis Prager, you know, advocating for animated child pornography, or, you know, his dad, you know, looking at the Playboy with his mom, right? That he decided to tell Matt Fradd about on their little debate. Like, it's stuff like that where all these people get outed, all these people get kicked out, and it really reveals that they were never serious about taking back the country or winning. They were serious about their little weird grift philosophy, their grifty ideologies, and everything that is associated with that. Or rather, everything that AF was for them was a vehicle to sell their product, if that makes sense.
That's one of the reasons why, like, at the opening of this show, I reiterated that my mindset that I've tried to stick myself to is just be content with, you know, just doing my part on the ground, coordinating people, not trying to be like, you know, the guy carrying the flag forward like Mel Gibson in The Patriot. The reason I said that is because I've definitely been involved in enough stuff and been at the forefront of enough stuff, like locally, not like nationally, but here in the Boston area, that I could easily have developed a massive ego around myself. And I've seen it happen to other people that I was involved with, and I don't want to be that. So I've a mentor of mine once told me, like, I mean, and this was actually in the context of like leading guilds in video games, but a mentor of mine once told me, like, John, you make a fantastic lieutenant, but you're a shit general. And so I was just like, so that's all I want to be. Like, I don't want to be any higher than a lieutenant. I don't want to get over promoted.
Yeah, dude, no, I mean, that's a great mindset to have. And I always love how these individuals admire a certain mustachioed gentleman, but they can't seem to understand when it's like, that guy had like people in certain roles in certain places for certain reasons, and they weren't allowed to just like suddenly be like, hey, I'm running the show, right? It's like everyone wants to be a fascist until it suddenly turns into they have a role or a thing to hold to. You know, not that I'm a fascist, but I just mean, like, you know, these guys want to be like edgy and be like, I'm this far right dictatorial figure. And then when they're told, like, okay, well, here's your place in the movement, they're like, wait, I thought I was going to be the guy leading the charge. I was going to be on the front lines. You know, it reminds me of that one meme where it's like the communist takeover, and it's the like Reddit looking guy. And he's like, wait, I thought I was going to be the queer game developer and stuff like that. And it's the guy behind him, dig the fucking hole. You know, he's like pumping the gun, right? It's like, that's how it goes. So, you know, for guys who are into like right-wing authoritarianism, they sure don't seem to be down when they're told, hey, you're at this role in the hierarchy. You got to be cool with this, you know?
Yeah, they always imagine themselves as the authority, and they don't think about what the flip side of that is. It's another thing I guess the Catholic mindset comes in handy, because we often think of there's a hierarchy no matter where you are, and we're sort of raised into that. It's like you have the laity, and then you have the clergy, and then within the clergy you have that whole hierarchy. One of the things that my parish priest once told me, he got transferred recently, but the previous parish priest that we had once told me that, I think this was him who said it, but he said that the things that priests and religious often struggle with the most is not actually celibacy. That's easy once you're used to it, but it's actually obedience that they struggle with the most on a day-to-day basis.
Obedience to their bishop and their hierarchy.
Particularly, yeah.
No, I mean that honestly makes sense, because sometimes too, you can be in the right and you can be right about something and you can be the person who is saying truth, but it can go to your head. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, Father James Altman is a fantastic example of that.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. He was a hero to me, and he's gone off what went off the way he's gone off the deep end. It just breaks my heart.
it really does break my heart too, because like his original like Catholics Can't Be Democrats video, he was spitting.
So good.
It was so good. And he still to this day, that OG video is completely correct in every way, shape, and form. He's right. Catholics cannot be Democrats. Catholics cannot be liberals. It is a mortal sin to be any of those things, right? And you know, when he was saying that, he was just spitting fire. But then he, you know, got it in his head that he was just this, you know, wicked firebrand. It could just say whatever he wanted and do whatever he wanted, and he didn't have to be obedient to anyone or anything. And I mean, now, last time I saw a picture of him, like, it's almost like his spiritual state is reflecting like physically on his body. Because if you look at him, he does not look good. Like, he looks inflamed. He looks kind of like bloated, like something's like going wrong with him or something. And I legitimately am kind of worried about him. You know what I mean?
Definitely, dude. There's so many people. This is another thing I wanted to talk to you about in general. Is recently there was a there's been a controversy on Twitter over alleged plans to further restrict the traditional Latin Mass. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, what do we actually know about the validity of these rumors, and how should faithful Catholics handle them if that actually goes through as people are reporting?
So I'm not particularly sure about the validity of the rumors. I tend to just kind of wait till things happen, because I think the rumor mill can get really bad, and you know,
That's perfectly understandable.
People can say certain things. I don't like to say anything until rumors are confirmed. What I think about a Latin Mass restriction is, I do think, number one, it would be imprudent. You know, I do think it would be an imprudent act. I think that the Latin Mass has nourished a lot of souls and has done a lot of good. And I think in general, restricting it would not be ideal. But that being said, even if it is restricted, we have to obey. And the other thing is too, I hate that people have set up this dichotomy where it's like clown mass or Latin Mass, right? Got to go to clown mass, you know, grandma is up the altar basically doing everything, or you go to just the high, most beautiful TLM in the world. And in reality, it's like there are so many beautiful Novus Ordo parishes that you go to, and I'm completely edified by. And I would even argue I've been equally edified by as going to Latin Mass. I mean, I've gone to parishes, especially like if you go, dude, if you're in Colorado, right? Like, there are so many parishes here where the way that they do the Mass, it's like you're just in love with it and you just fall in love with it. And so, you know, as imprudent as I think a Latin Mass restriction would be, and I do think it would be very sad, and I'm certainly not for the Latin Mass being restricted. It's like the church is always going to be the church, right? The church isn't changing or anything like that. And on top of that, too, it's like I love the Mass in general, right? I don't hate the Novus Ordo, and I don't really understand why people do, to be quite honest. I mean, every single time I see someone hate on the Novus Ordo, it's all these accidental elements that don't belong to it in its nature itself, right? They're always like, oh, well, this one parish I went to, well, this other parish I went to had this cringe thing and had guitars up at the altar or whatever. And I'm like, okay, is that required? Well, no, but you have to ask yourself why this is going on. Yeah, well, why this is going on is because for the past, I would almost argue like 80 to 100 years, we've just had liturgical laxity, right? I mean, you can read a beautiful article by Monsignor Charles Pope that goes into the fact that even prior to the council, people were doing the TLM in very bad ways. They were.
Oh yeah, there were definitely. I've been researching this as well. There were definitely clown masses done in the old missal at the time.
There were. There completely were. I mean, one only needs to look at the Requiem Mass of John F. Kennedy to see like Cardinal Cushing just kind of running through the Mass. I mean, it's a Latin Mass, right? It's a, on paper should be everything you'd ever want. But the way that he runs through the Mass, there's such a lack of care. There's such a lack of love. There's no heart to it. It's just this like kind of banal uh uh exercise of just like, well, I guess we got to run through this, right? I guess we got to get done with the Mass because there's donuts in the parish after or whatever, right? And when you realize that, and then you contrast that with seeing, like St. Michael's Abbey doing like a Novus Ordo Mass, and it's one of the most beautiful masses I've ever seen. It's like, what really is the heart of the issue here? Is it TLM versus Novus Ordo, or is it just the kids want reverence and they don't want crappy masses going on? And it has nothing to do with what particular form of the Roman rite that we perform in regards to consecrating the sacraments. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, one example that I can think of is Mary Immaculate of Lourdes in Newton, Massachusetts. It's a two-form diocesan parish. Half their masses are TLM, half their masses are Novus Ordo, and their Novus Ordo masses are done with just as much care and reverence as their TLMs. But I think that if a new motu proprio did come down that would restrict that community from doing their TLMs at the diocesan level, it would be devastating. But I guarantee you, all of their if all their masses had to be Novus Orders, they would still be beautiful.
Of course, they're not going to suddenly turn to clown masses because of a restriction or anything like that. That's completely ludicrous. And I mean, to think about like there is legitimate care for the liturgy going on in the church, and I'm even seeing parishes and stuff like that that are being made beautiful just because people who are becoming priests care about the liturgy, right? They're not doing sort of ridiculous pomp or any of these sort of self-referential things anymore. They're sticking to what has been laid down. They're sticking to the rubrics, and people are going to those parishes in droves. And these are Novus Ordo parishes. They're not even TLM parishes. So as devastating as I think a restriction would be, and I'm certainly not for a restriction, to say that, like, to have almost the opposite reaction where you're like, well, the faith isn't the faith anymore, or whatever. It's like, was your faith really in the church or just a given liturgy?
Well, I think that like the analogy that I've found most convincing from the other side is to compare, like, say, if the Anglican Ordinariate or the Eastern churches were treated in a similar way, where they said, okay, you can't have your liturgies anymore. Those would obviously shake a lot of people's faith who have grown up nourished by those liturgies. So I agree with you that ultimately it would be imprudent, but I'm still sympathetic to those who would be essentially scandalized by such an action. But I think the flip side of that is, I keep coming back to, I think, a saying that was attributed to Padre Pio, who's a perfect example of someone who was persecuted by his superiors unjustly, but was vindicated by his obedience. And I think the saying that is attributed to him is, "Sweet is the hand of the church, even when it is raised against us."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And I always bring up this fact, like, look, the revival of the church is inevitable. It's going to happen, right? And not only is it going to happen, it is happening currently. And so even a restriction like that would not inhibit a revival of the church or revitalization of the faith at all. That's trucking along. And if that would be a horrible bump in the road, I'm certainly not for it. It's still going to truck along. Things are still moving in the right direction and stuff like that. And there's no doubt that things are going to just keep getting better and better and better, as they already are getting better and better and better.
Yeah, it's just demographics is destiny. Like, I was looking through multiple articles talking about how young priests in the church are getting more and more theologically orthodox. And this is a chart showing that. But basically, yeah, before 1960, you have over 60 or up to 80% are theologically liberal. This is this is by year of ordination. And it's just completely reversed itself because, surprise, surprise, liberalism and secularism does not produce vocations. So the only people who are called to the faith in this environment are people who actually believe it.
Or people who actually care about the faith, right?
Yeah.
And, all those progressive priests or whatever, all those priests who don't believe in the faith, they've left the church. They've completely abandoned the church. I mean, when I was watching that documentary, The New American Church, right? Or it was like The New American Catholic or whatever it was called, it became so apparent to me. We would look up these names of the different priests that would appear in the documentary. All of them had left the priesthood. All of them. None of them were priests anymore. They were all like laymen who then started to attend like Episcopalian churches, or they would go off and do some other thing or become atheist or whatever. And, progressivism is a cancer and a disease, and it's being weeded out of the church because God protects his church, right? The unfailing presence of the Holy Spirit in the church weeds people out like that because they never had the faith to begin with.
Yeah, now pretty much all of the Christian denominations are facing something like this, but the problem that they're having, I'm thinking, of course, particularly Redeemed Zoomer, the problem that his denomination is having is that basically liberals are leaving the church, but conservatives are being scandalized into schisming out even faster. So which basically leaves the liberals in control of the institutions, and so what Redeemed Zoomer has been trying to do is his whole quote unquote Protestant Reconquista project, where basically just trying to get the conservatives to just stand their ground and hold on long enough for the liberals to leave naturally, as they tend to do. But the problem with that is he has to, basically, the way I see it is he has to fight against like the Protestant DNA, which is basically like church becomes corrupt. Okay, let's just start a new church. Like they've been doing that for the past 500 years. So if there's a place to stand your ground, it would be the Catholic Church, because that is our DNA. You hold fast to Rome no matter what. And so, yes, we do have some people that will flake off to Eastern Orthodoxy, or some people who will leave the faith in other ways. Like it's spiritual warfare, and unfortunately there are casualties. But the bulk of the flock, it's in our DNA that you hold to the flock no matter what. So we actually have a tremendous advantage there, whereas Redeemed Zooman is, unfortunately, I had to say it, he's fighting an uphill battle. Now, I wish him the best of luck in that endeavor, because I want the conservatives to hold on to those institutions, because I feel like it'll be easier to reconvert them if they're at least still believing Christians. So I'm interested in, I want him complete success in the Protestant Reconquista, taking back the mainline denominations of the Protestant churches. But like I said, like I showed you in the chart, we in the Catholic Church are actually in a very strong position. All we literally need to do is basically what we're already doing and just keep doing that. Now, I wouldn't advocate for just to keep doing that. I think we need to be even more aggressive and strengthen our positions and keep building our social networks, like in real life, keep building our parish communities and actively push for more orthodoxy and more fidelity in our parish communities. But yeah, even if we just keep doing what we're doing now, I think it was Anthony on Avoiding Babylon made this point earlier, that Gen X basically produced virtually no vocations whatsoever. So you have a bunch of predominantly boomers in the episcopate who overwhelmingly have sort of like a post-World War II consensus mindset. Some great ones like Cardinal Mueller and Cardinal Burke and some people like that. But a lot of people with, unfortunately, the soft post-World War II consensus mindset. But then you have but eventually they're gonna pass on. And then what you're going to be left with, the only people left with to fill the vacant chairs of the bishops are going to be a bunch of 40-year-old Zoomers at that point who are going to be extremely based.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You're going to literally have like Jude Law, the young pope, but it's the entire episcopacy.
Legit. I mean, it really is just sort of an inevitable principle taking hold. And even sort of the few Gen X sort of bishops taking, the episcopate or what have you, are very, very conservative too. I mean, Archbishop Aquila right, is, I believe, from Generation X, and he is incredibly orthodox. You have, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, a lot of the Midwest bishops are kind of, more Gen X, younger bishops, and they're incredibly conservative. So it's like you have so many of these conservative bishops taking hold of the episcopate and transforming the church, especially in America, for the better. Meanwhile, these liberal bishops are just fading out and becoming yesterday's news. No one remembers them. No one really honors their memory. They don't really, make an impact. But these other bishops are just beloved, and people love them with all their hearts.
Yeah, but to the the flip side of that, what we have to look out for is as the older liberal bishops start to fade out, many of them know that their project, that their dream of like the spirit of Vatican II and the post World War II consensus, they can sense that that's going away. They can see the demographics as destiny as well. So the danger that I feel is that they are going to try to do as much damage as possible on their way out, basically. Like, I think that they're going to try to look for some way to replace themselves. My theory is that they're going to push even harder for female ordinations or a female diaconate just to try to replace themselves with something.
Well, I mean, they've run into a wall at that point, because I mean that's been completely shut down.
Yes, salute to our based African bishops at the Synod of Synodality holding the line.
That's what I'm saying, dude. I mean, those projects have been shut down. I think at this point, it's just kind of them. I don't know. I don't really see them having any coordinated plan, to be honest. I think it's just one of those things where they're just going to try and, to the best of their ability, just mutter their nonsense and have horrible interviews or what have you with like the secular news and the secular world. Meanwhile, like we're the actual Catholics, we're the actual people who believe the faith, who want to live the faith and want to practice the faith, and their power is just going to continue to wane and wane and wane until it's eventually nothing.
If I were to guess at them having some sort of plan whatsoever, besides like trying to fiddle with the hierarchy or something, I think that they're trying to scandalize conservative Catholics out of the church. Like there seems to be this collaboration with the secular media and with like the people like James Martin's New Way Ministries, where they are like trying to claim Pope Francis and constantly push headlines in front of people, trying to convince people that he's like the wokest woke person you can imagine. And this is one of the reasons why I think what the Groypers have been doing, holding fast to Pope Francis and sort of like the meme of like most base Pope ever, even though it's a big tongue in cheek, but pointing out that actually it's a bit more of a mixed bag. There's a bit more nuance there. And there have been examples of him like excommunicating people on the extreme left side of things and stuff like that. And nobody ever hears about those examples.
No.
So it's so it's important to shatter that narrative that even if the Francis pontificate, we can easily find our nitpicks of things that could be done more prudently. Like I know that I would certainly like them to drop the hammer harder on the German bishops and things like that. So I can easily find things to nitpick, but it's really important to sort of shatter that narrative to refuse to let the progressives just claim Pope Francis and let them walk away with that. Because I think that's how they want to win, is by basically try to replicate their success with the mainline Protestant denominations and just get the conservatives to leave.
Yeah, well, and unlike the mainline Protestant denominations, they're not going to win, because it's not ultimately us we are not ultimately the ones in control of any of this. That's the funny thing. It's like, we're not in control. It's Jesus who's in control. Jesus has always been in control. And these freaks, these horrible monsters, don't have any control at the end of the day. They don't have any power to change what God has ordained. They never could have that power. And so, unlike the Protestant or Eastern Orthodox world, where someone can take over the episcopate and essentially change things permanently and actually change their churches, we will always cling fast to the same faith that is unchanging and unfailing to the very end.
Oh yeah, you have the same retreatism. I was just talking about the Protestants, but you have this same retreatism in Eastern Orthodoxy as well, where the Greek Greek aligned denominations are starting to get more and more sussy, and the conservatives are fleeing over to like the Russian aligned denominations. So yeah, that's it. And so yeah, that's it really is just the Catholic Church that just has this DNA of just holding fast to Rome, no
Well,
matter what.
we fundamentally do, because I even remember Rushfi. Rushfi always used to like criticize the Catholic Church, and then he wrote an entire article about how he left. I think it was like I can't remember what jurisdiction he was in. It might have been Antiochian or what have you, but he was now moving under the Russian Orthodox jurisdiction, because he's like, they're more conservative and they're more based in trad or what have you. And it's like, you have to really wonder, it's like, are you one church if you feel you have to move entire different jurisdictions to practice your faith? I mean, they might criticize us and say, well, you guys move parishes or whatever. Yeah, but I know that other parish is always going to have the sacraments, and I can go to that other parish and like, it's just a bad parish. It's not a completely different power structure and governance, right, that I'm under, or even conception of the church, like in the conflict with Patriarch Bartholomew, thinking that he has all this power. People have called him a papist because of his views of the power of the Patriarchate of Constantinople and Moscow, that says, Bartholomew is incurring on the natural rights of the church, and he is usurping this power that he doesn't have, and he's a heretic and stuff like that, and he's dividing the church. So they are moving, whether they like to admit it or not, they're really not just moving jurisdictions. Like, they're basically moving entire churches and just on paper saying, well, I guess we're in communion.
I mean, yeah, just ask Moscow and Constantinople if they're part of the same church.
They're not anymore. And same with Alexandria and Moscow, right? I mean, they will have schism upon schism upon schism, and they'll still affirm like, well, if we just all say the creed or whatever, we're all the same faith. That's not how the fathers saw it.
Yeah, so they're going full invisible church mode.
Well, and the reason why they do is because Komiakov, who wrote during the Sobernost movement in Russia, which was this sort of revitalization of Eastern Orthodox culture in Russia, and had like a lot of intellectuals behind it. It was very anti-Catholic too. He essentially wrote this like Protestant conception of ecclesiology, where he's like, the church is the people who are united in the Holy Spirit, and there's not really this like distinction or whatever. And there's even been many Orthodox writers who have like written against his theory. I think like one was Archbishop Stellianos, who led the commission between Orthodox and Catholics, and he was on the Orthodox side, of course. And he's like, that's ridiculous. Like, he's like, the way that we know the faith is not just this through this like ambiguous body of Christians, but like there is a magisterium, there is like a teaching office to the church that even we abide by, is exercised by our bishops, right? So you have like Komiakov's like theory of epistemology that then turns into their ecclesiology, where it's like, well, orthodoxy is just whoever holds the Orthodox faith, but who's to say what that faith is, right? Whereas there's other Orthodox who say, no, there is a magisterium, there is a teaching office, there is an exercise of that teaching office, and Komiakov was misintentioned, you know?
It's almost like they have some sort of development of doctrine going on.
That's what I'm saying, dude. But they'll never admit that.
They will never admit that. Exact same as the first millennium. Not a single thing has changed.
Not a single thing. You can't find Palamite theology in the first millennium, but hey, it was there in its nascent form, right?
Oh, well, if it was there in its nascent form, it's almost like it developed from that point. That's almost like that's how that works.
Oh, good stuff.
Okay, so I'd like to go back to let me ask you more specifically about let me circle back here and ask you about your experiences at AFPAC 4. Was that the first sort of political event that you've been to?
So I had actually gone to Fuentes Rally 2. So that was actually the first. This was the second. And Fuentes Rally 2 taught me a lot and stuff like that. It was a good experience. I mean, I had a great time listening to Nick speak. The hype for it was just unreal. Like, it was so much fun. And I learned a lot about sort of being in a political event because I'd never gone to a political event before, but it was very interesting to see how, like, just people are friends or enemies, and there's this whole kind of interpersonal element to it, and the online reality blends into the real world and stuff like that. And it taught me a lot about that kind of social arrangement. And then when I went to Detroit, it just was very positive. Like, we were just kind of all one heart and one mind in that moment. Like, there was no beef with anybody. Everyone was cool. Everyone was buddies and hanging out, and we just were able to, like, coalesce in this, like, just unified body when we marched. I mean, it was so cool. Like, I cannot illustrate how cool it was being able to march together. We just were this one unified mass of people. And, people saw us, and they saw us as this, like, one unit of just people coming together to proclaim our faith and want to put America first. And I think that's why it really made an impression upon the attendance of, like, Turning Point USA, or even the people who saw us on the street. They're like, who are these people? Like, this isn't a group of, like, even like 10 or 20 people. This is a group of, like, 500 people, right? Like, 500 people.
500 people on the sidewalk outside Turning Point USA, circling around the building, chanting "Christ is King."
That's what I'm saying, dude. And, like, Turning Point USA was so lame this year because you had, like, Alex Clark advertising freaking water, man. Freedom water, right? Alex Clark advertising freedom water, and just, like, the energy was so low. There was just a bunch of, like, old boomers walking around the place, like, kind of just out of touch with everything going on. I heard from someone who had attended it, like, the only young people that were there were working the event. There was no, like, organic young people hanging out and appreciating the event. And I'm like, ain't that ain't that just like a TPUSA event, 2024, to not have any young, like, vital element to it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, buy my special branded water. You're supporting capitalism, shit.
Buy my water. Hey, Goyam, buy the water, okay? Buy the water and sign up for ZipRecruiter. And it's like, what kind of message is that sending to the right? I mean, this is why everyone, when they saw the footage after on Twitter and stuff like that, they're like, this is a vital movement. Like, America First is a vital movement. People want to be a part of this. People want to participate in it. Like, this other thing, like, people don't want to be here. It's something they tolerate or whatever. And they're also here for, like, other interests, whether it's, like, money or power. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, like, again, I keep coming back to this. I have seen so many people get done in by clout chasing. It is like the bane of existence on political activism. It's the worst. But if anything, that's what I feel like that. I feel like in many ways, the focus on on making it a Catholic movement does have sort of like a purifying effect in a sense. Definitely compared to any other of I mean, I've basically sworn off organizing for any sort of just like generic American patriotism anymore. Like, I can't organize for anything that isn't explicitly Catholic at this point, whether it's like with the Knights of Columbus, or whether it's like for like America First. If I'm going to be involved in anything, there has to be some sort of, it has to be Catholic focused, because anything else just gets unfocused, basically. Like, it doesn't keep grounded. I know that I'm trying to basically figure out what I'm trying to say as I'm trying to say it in this sense, but like,
it's wishy-washy. It's the man who built his house on sand, because it's like, if you don't have the faith uniting you, you have this, like, generic sort of Christian ecumenism, but that doesn't work because, we're all for true ecumenism, where we can sit down with Protestants and Eastern Orthodox and, legitimately help them overcome misunderstandings about our faith. Like, Protestants thinking we don't value the Bible, or Orthodox thinking we change tradition or whatever, right? And having those charitable discussions. But ecumenism becomes rancid when it becomes you watering down your Catholic faith or saying there's salvation outside the church, which there's not, right? And the moment you stop giving witness to the authentic Catholic faith, and you sort of just become sidelined in this larger bubble of Christianity, because it's not Christianity, we are Christianity, and conservatism, it always falls apart, right? There's no unitive aspect to it. It's a generic idea that changes with the sands of time. But if you're rooted in your Catholic faith, that will never change. The faith will never alter, never change, and will always be the same to the end of time. So, because of that, people feel like they have the rock to settle on and base their entire political identity in that rock, if that makes sense.
Yep. I mean, I know I'm almost sort of like repeating myself here, but I think the attitude that you would think, well, a bunch of edgy, rebellious teenagers would be taking the sort of rad trad anti Pope Francis line, but no, it's the exact opposite. They're but you all are radically pro Pope Francis, which I support. In fact, in many ways, following the Groypers was a big part, I think, in pulling myself away from going down the sort of rad trad rabbit hole myself, because I've definitely been in, because after I went through like a lukewarm period with my faith in my college days, but then came back like super radical, and then discovering the traditional Latin Mass was very important to me as part of that. But then through that, I did get exposed, particularly through like the online sphere. It wasn't the TLM itself. And I hate it when people try to say, oh, the TLM is turning people into rat trap. No, it's not the TLM itself. It's people on the internet basically that are, again, buying into the same stuff that the progressives are pushing, trying to claim Pope Francis. You have basically a bunch of people on the right-wing side of things that get blackpilled, and they're like, oh, see, the progressives, they have Pope Francis. He's their guy. And but I love that. Again, I love that the Groypers are sort of like refusing to go along with that narrative.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's because we recognize that, Pope Francis is, when we say Holy Father, he is our Holy Father. And we, in this movement, obey hierarchy, we obey order. And what else is the ultimate order except Christ's church on earth? If we do not obey that order of things, we are just fooling ourselves. We're acting like fools. And this is why I don't take any, so-called Catholic political movement seriously that's full of a bunch of people who dissent from Pope Francis, because it's like, what are you doing, dude? You can't have, if you want Logos to rise, you can't have Logos without, Petros, right? You can't have Logos without Peter, right? If Jesus tells you my church is built upon myself, the true rock of the church, and I make my child Peter, the rock by delegation, but then you say, oh, I don't want to obey that rock. That rock is, problematic or what have you. Well, congratulations, you've just cut yourself off from Christ. And so any political movement that you claim to be Catholic in, but doesn't have that rootedness in Christ, is you're just LARPing, man. Like, how can you say, oh, I want the entire world to become Catholic, but I'm actually not willing to obey the person who is the head of the church, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's just like how these mad trad types will say, you need to convert to Catholicism, Mr. Ortho Bro or Mr. Protestant, but also the Pope is like the most evil person in the world, and he's a globalist, and he's all these things. So, there you go, right?
Yeah, you need to convert to Catholicism, which is located in one little chapel in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I always rail on that so much. It's like, you need to convert to the true faith. It's this chapel in, some little town in Idaho where like the true faith is continuing on. I mean, give me a break, man.
You shared on your Telegram a clip of E. Michael Jones where he's talking about Bishop Williamson, and I wanted to play that very briefly here.
Oh yeah,
because he nails this whole situation perfectly.
So this is me. I'm going to help. I'm going to be the Boy Scout here, and I'm going to help the church out. I'm going to go to England. I'm going to talk to Bishop Williamson, and I did go over there. He's at Wimbledon. The tennis thing is going on as I arrive. Walk in the door. The first thing Bishop Williamson says to me is, I have a letter on my desk that says, I accept Vatican II in light of tradition. So I said, well, go up and sign it, and then we'll talk about tennis, because that's the only reason I came here. And then he says to me, well, actually, Archbishop Lefebvre would have signed that letter. And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm getting nervous now. You mean you're not going to sign this? How could you not sign a letter like this? That is carte blanche. And then for the next 3 hours, he tells me why he cannot sign that letter. That's the mindset. Much as I like Bishop Williamson, love to sit around and talk with him, but he's got this death wish. He's determined to die outside of the church. And so in the course of the conversation of him explaining to me why he's not going to sign that letter, he tells me, pretty in so many words, basically that he is the true church, and that Rome is pretty much going to have to come around to him and ask to be admitted back into the true church of Bishop Williamson. That's the attitude the guy had. It's not an exaggeration. Okay? So that shows you how deep and pertinacious and wicked schism is. No matter how congenial the guy is, it's wicked because it's based on lack of charity. And there's no point in debating doctrine with a schismatic, because that's not the issue.
That pretty much nails it perfectly. And Bishop Williamson is actually a perfect example of someone who the first time I see his clips around, I'm like, yo, this guy's amazing. And then I learn how he's in schism, and it's like, oh, come on. What?
Yeah, dude. I mean, he nailed it on the head. He is incredible. He is an incredible orator. He gives some of the best homilies I've ever heard. But as you said, John, like, he fundamentally is undercutting himself by being in schism, right? I mean, the fact that he's not with the church anymore and he's, operating essentially this counter church, it's like he can give all the beautiful homilies and orations in the world, but he's ultimately like missing the forest through the trees. You know what I mean?
Yeah. On the flip side of things, I also have so much issue with like the post trads that are responding to this, but they're also responding in like the most uncharitable way possible. Like, again, basically throwing anybody who goes to TLM under the bus. Like, oh, the FSSP is the reason why people are going into schism. Like, no, you idiots. Like,
well, and post trads, like the kind of like culture that unfortunately like Michael Lofton has created, and like a lot of these other individuals, it's fundamentally an imbalance from like what they came from, right? Because they went from being, I mean, every single post trad went from being this super critic of the papacy, this super critic of Vatican II and all the things that we're defending as faithful Orthodox Catholics. But then when they rebel against that backdrop and they suddenly flip the other way, they feel like they have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's like suddenly any old book published by a trad printing house is bad and you shouldn't read it. Suddenly any, allocution from a pope that's not from at least like 1968 is outdated, and we can just kind of put that to the side. And it fundamentally in that moment betrays the continuity that our faith will always have, right? Our faith is continuous with itself. And they're missing the whole point of what the issue was with sort of the mad trads. The issue with the mad trads is not their desire to adhere to tradition. That is a fundamental element of being Catholic. If you do not want to adhere to the traditions of Holy Mother Church, you're not Catholic. Congratulations. You've severed yourself from the faith. But what the mad trads issue fundamentally is it's an inability to it really is an inability to be concordant with the authority that safeguards tradition, right? It's a mistrust in the pneumatology of the Holy Spirit that operates within the church, that confirms the church, that guards her in all truth, and thinking that the church is purely a human institution. And because it's a human institution, we have to safeguard tradition like we would a political ideology. Whereas the Holy Spirit safeguards tradition, and tradition can never, leave the church. It can never, fall away from the church. I mean, that's saying the words of Christ can fall away from the church. Well, if that can happen, then the church is in the church.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm basically just in this situation where like I have the bad trads on one end and the post trads on the other, and I'm just like, I just want to go to mass. I just want to be a faithful Catholic. I just want to raise a good family and die in a crusade. That's all I want.
That's what I'm saying, man. I mean, fundamentally, it's like people just want to be faithful Orthodox Catholics, and they don't want to, have these like interest groups that want to do sort of a Catholic partialism or take elements of the faith that they like and leave other elements, ironically, cafeteria Catholics. They don't want those people talking in their ear anymore. They just want faithful Orthodox Catholicism. And like, that's what the faith's all about. So the more we can cut out space for Catholics to just be Orthodox, faithful Catholics, that's what I'm all about,
Wonderful. And I will say you do a great job on your YouTube channel with the apologetics, and you do a great job on your Instagram with the memes. I am constantly sharing stuff that you put on your Instagram or your Telegram with my young adult group. I'm constantly reposting it in their Discord.
Dude, I appreciate that so much, John Paul. John, I was about to say your full Telegram name. John, I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that so much, buddy. Like, I really try to do that as a labor of love. And so for you to share that with your friends means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's just amazing in my personal experience. Like, again, we talked about the generational differences, and it's like everyone in my all of the young adults who go to my young adult group, they're all fully Orthodox. It's like,
yeah. I mean, it's beautiful, and those young adult groups are very heartening because you go there and just everyone's focused on the faith, like everyone's focused on being a faithful Catholic, right? And I mean, you cannot be in those groups without cracking a smile. It's just so pleasant.
Yep. So if I'm gonna wrap up this stream here if you don't mind, but my final advice to anybody who watches this stream, it would be if you're trying to make the world a better place, work on yourself, work on yourself first, get your own house in order. And then as you move out into the world, build your own social network, get involved with your local parish, make this your political manifesto. And then as people, we actually have a tremendous advantage here in that respect, that we have a background that encourages us to take the responsibility, that we have a positive vision that we can put forward into the world. And the more people start doing that, like I said, with the chart I shared earlier, we're already winning generationally. It's like you said, it is. And this is I titled the stream, Why America First is Inevitable. This is why it's inevitable. The liberals are literally self-deleting themselves from existence. They are not having kids.
They're moving out, man. It is so inevitable. And like, we're just moving in and taking over those territories. It is the rise of the faithful Orthodox Catholic year by year.
Yep. So just keep the faith, keep doing what you're doing, build yourself up, become a better Catholic, and then build outward and expand your social network. Start organizing with other Catholics at the local level. And then as we start integrating those social networks, it's like the church is a sleeping giant. It really is. Like people like that. You have like them like I don't mean to dunk on our Protestant brothers, although I will for the bants occasionally. But some people are like, oh, we want to build that like a Christian nationalist coalition, but we watch out for those Catholics. They don't want to. It's like you're not going to be. There's too many of us. You're not going to be able to have a Christian nationalist coalition without the Catholics, and we're going to be leading it.
We're going to be leading it. It's inevitable. Nothing's going to stop us. I'm so prepared for it. It's going to be amazing.
Yep. And I'm ready to just do my part, mobilizing troops on the ground. Other people can take the glory. Nick can be the king or the general or whatever. But I'll be doing my part.
There we go, man. That's what I'm talking about. You got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you're going to continue to contribute great things, dude. I'm excited to see where your contributions take us.
Oh, I'm definitely, like, a lot of those clips I've shared, I'm definitely working them into an edit.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about, man. I love it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Pinesap. What are you currently working on? What's something big that people in your audience can look forward to?
I mean, I do have the debate with Luigi coming up. That's going to happen July
Right.
19th.
I saw. Oh, you and him are bros again. I saw that.
Yeah. That was really awesome. I mean, like, for him to say that after we had our back and forth and stuff like that, and, I hadn't really been the kindest to him. And I feel bad for that. And, he said some things to me and we would go back and forth. Like, it means a lot that now I consider us friends at this point. We're friends, and it's just going to be, the debate is not going to be nasty at all. It's just going to be in the pursuit of truth, Catholic truth. And that's what I'm looking forward to. That's how I want it to be.
I'll definitely be looking forward to that debate. Thank you very much, Pinesap, for joining me for the past 2 hours. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Yeah, man, it's been great talking to you, John, and God bless you, bro. And I will juice anything that you make. So just send it my way, okay?
Might take me a while. I work 10 hours a day, but I'll definitely be putting that forward in my free time.
Perfect, bro. That sounds great, okay?
All right. Thank you very much, Pinesap. God bless you.
God bless you, G.